Welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to be going into some details as to why Sparking Zero only has one local multiplayer map, the Hyperbolic Time Chamber. So I've built a sample project in Unreal Engine 5 to explain why only one map. So let's get into it. So the reason is quite simple. The developers developed Sparking Zero with online multiplayer and single player in mind, as stated by the main producer Jin Furutanisa. He also mentioned that with wind effects and weather changing elements, as well as destructibility of surrounding objects such as buildings and rocks and stuff, it was quite difficult to implement local multiplayer.
それらの表現とかつてのような画面分割でのローカル対戦とを両立させるのは困難であったものの、皆様により良いゲーム体験を提供できるよう今作ならではの形を模索し、オンラインでの対戦を前提とした一人用のゲームとして開発を進めてまいりました。
How I look at it is that it will take a considerable amount of time to get all the maps optimized with playable frame rates, and that's just the definitive reason why they didn't have enough time to develop to get to the point where they can optimize everything. Now it is using Unreal Engine 5. This means there's nanite, you can implement FSR as well as TSR upscaling, and there's a bunch of optimizations you can implement. However, going through 10 to 20, maybe 30 maps, as well as 164 characters in a few months, while still developing other aspects of the game, they surely did not have time for this, and they did not plan to do this. So we're actually lucky to just get it already in one map. So kudos to them for just listening to the community for that. I know it's not big, but they might be expanding on it later on. So I'm going to go into Unreal Engine 5 and show you some stuff, including some stats as to why. Okay, here we are in Unreal Engine 5 with a sample project with Xenoverse 2 assets I imported, which was quite a setup. However, if you look at the top right, you'll see game, draw, and GPU time. Now the game is the game thread on CPU side and GPU is the GPU time. So basically, if your GPU is the bottleneck, the GPU time will spike. If the game thread or your CPU is the bottleneck, meaning your code may be unoptimized, it will be the game thread that's taking longer. So as you can see at the left bottom, there is a graph that shows you those bunch as to what spikes where. So I implemented Broly from Xenoverse 2. He has a bunch of effects on him. As you can see, there's rising greens things. And a little bit of aura. It's not well seen on the scene because it's green and the map is quite green, so it's not very well seen. There's also a slight outline. I'm running this very low resolution, and if he flies, you can see there's this green outline, which is also an effect, Niagara effect. And when you land, and this as well as Niagara effect, the key charge, which is an effect that also uses graphics. If you look at the GPU time, it's 12 seconds, and when we use it, it jumps up to 14 seconds. 12, 14. Now, for multiplayer purposes, I programmed the button to switch to multiplayer. Now you can see the frame time and GPU time has increased from 12 seconds to 16 seconds. The game time has also increased because it's running double the programming on the same CPU and thread. So there's a bunch of optimizations that's not implemented. However, we got this here. and it's more demanding. So another thing we can do now is go and say we want stat RHI. This will show us the tris count or the triangle count. Let me just remove one player. Now you can see triangles drawn. If you look at the bottom, you'll see there's counters and triangles drawn. Now you can see that it's drawing average between 510 to 520,000 triangles. Now look what happens when you implement a second player. It immediately spikes up to 1.2 million. So there's more triangles being drawn in the scene. This impacts performance, definitely. Now it also impacts memory, but not as much as you would think, because we are actually reusing some things already drawn in the scene. You can always reuse textures already in memory. You just need to adjust positions and locations and stuff like that. So you can see this is actually why we have an issue with Sparking Zero using or actually not using all of their maps, because some of their maps have a lot more stuff in them, and the Hyperbolic Time Chamber is quite empty. And remember, this is an empty scene and we're running like 30 FPS here. Now if you think effects, you're gonna see effects, and let's just remove this. Let's go back to single player. Okay, the triangle count this side is a little bit high. Okay, 400 and something thousand. Now if we charge energy, this Niagara effect increases the tris count as well, because it's using 30 sphere objects as a mesh renderer. Now if you remove that, you can see there's a bunch of objects still on the ground. It's also mesh rendered rocks. Now if you do multiplayer, let's just see the amount. It jumps around 100,000 triangles. I'm just averaging this stuff. This is not 100% accurate. So let's go to multiplayer. Let's see. We're at 1.232 million, 33 million. Let's see how much. I'm expecting it to jump to around 200,000. As you can see, 1.3 to 1.5. So the effect is being drawn twice. So this has a huge impact on CPU and graphics performance as well, depending on which simulation you're using, CPU or GPU. So that's why they stated wind effects and weather effects have an impact on performance, and that's why they can't implement it on all maps. Now let's just go. I'm gonna stat RHI this out of the way because we're not interested in this right now. I'm gonna go and increase the settings because yeah, my system is not very well. It's quite an old computer, so it's understanding that it performs this bad. Okay, so let's just play. As you can see, it's 30 FPS now. Charging energy, and it's already dropping into the 20s. Now, this GPU in this computer is quite similar to the leaked specs on Bandai Namco's website for Sparking Zero for the minimum requirement. So that's basically low settings 1080p. And it seems legit. So if we now implement 2 players, it drops from 30 FPS to around 23. And they spike down to 20. Now imagine you're running this. Okay, there's 15, and now you drop and use energy, like Niagara effects and stuff, it drops down to lower than 10 FPS, and that's really an unplayable experience. So I've done some benchmarks without recording, because I'm actually recording right now, and that impacts performance. So I'm going to showcase you some benchmarks for single player, which is this, multiplayer, 3 players, and 4 players. So it's 1, 2, 3, and 4 players. I benchmarked each one on a specific setting. I think I used like the low settings on every one, so it's all the same settings. So let's just go and do that. Okay, so onto the benchmarks. As you can see, here's the graph. Now the blue line is for a single player, and the green line is for 2 players or just split screen, and 3 player split screen is yellow, and for red is 4 player split screen. Now this just shows general performance impact. As for the red line, there's one that dropped to 0, so I don't think that's accurate enough. There might have been a spike somewhere else that caused that drop. So we have that. And as for averages, the single player experience compared to the split screen 2-player experience, so the 2-player experience performed 26% worse than the single player. As for 3 players against the single player, the 3-player performed 49% worse, and as for 4-player, it is 60% worse than single player in performance. Well, that's it for just a quick benchmark, so let's go on and explain what they can do to fix Sparking Zero, as well as some performance and specs requirements to explain in detail what's going on. So let's go. Okay, so this here is the Bandai Namco Entertainment Europe website. Now the reason I'm here is if you search for graphics in the inspection tab, basically looking at the code for the website, it's not actually on the website, but it's hidden in the code. You can find the Core i7-4790 and Ryzen 5 1500X, as well as the graphics cards being the GTX 660 2GB. There's different 660s, meaning there's a lower end one, so specifically the 2GB one, as well as the AMD HD 7850 2GB for 1080p 30fps, 12GB of memory required for the game, RAM, and for 4K 30fps GTX 1060 or R9 Fury 4GB. Now, the reason I'm stating specs is actually for the performance of the multiplayer maps. I'll talk about that later on. But let's just go to the PS5 specs, which is a Ryzen 7 3700X Zen 2 8-core 16-thread CPU, if I'm not mistaken, as well as a RTX 2080 Super graphics card or RX 5700. So that's the PS5 specs. The reason I talked about that is because the PS5 is running at 4K. The Xbox Series X is also running at 4K. The S is running at 1440p. And Steam has a 720p. That's likely like a minimum resolution setting thing. But you could run it at 4K widescreen, whatever. So it's running at 60 FPS at both of these. The S and X and PlayStation 5 is running at 60, and you can run recommended on PC 60 FPS. Now, the reason Sparking Zero is not able to get all playable maps on the local multiplayer is FPS drop is probably going below 60, and in worst case scenarios going below 30 depending on the map. Like for instance, the Archipelago or City map might have features like reflections for ray tracing reflections, lumen reflections in Unreal Engine, or destruction and aura effects included with wind effects and destruction effects like the dust and explosions included with the actual objects breaking, which is a different effect, maybe like chaos destruction or a different kind of destruction, mass destruction type of thing that also impacts performance. So all of those things bunched together might have a perfect case where the FPS drops below 60 and even below 30 at the worst case. Especially on the Series S, because the Series S GPU is a little bit underperformant considering PS5 and Xbox Series X. Now as for the PC side, remember PC is not limited by specs. They can have a 3090 or 4090 GPU, 4080 GPU, or a little bit lower but still higher than the consoles. That means all maps might just be playable, even though it can be the worst case scenario, it might be playable. And also you can just tune your settings on PC, like low settings, medium settings, high settings, so you can just tune the settings and still get a playable experience. As for PS5 and Xbox, like I said, worst case scenarios might happen. What I can do to fix this, however, is they can lower the LOD counts or the amount of objects in scene. They can increase the LOD counts and lower the amount of objects in scene on Unreal Engine, because they're working on Unreal Engine. Here we are in Unreal Engine, and as you can see here, we have foliage. You can just tune it out. Everything disappears. However, they can't just do this. If they do this, the game is gonna look ugly. So it takes a lot of work manually tuning the amount of objects in scene. For instance, let's just get this foliage system back, and we're gonna go to this map, and we're gonna go to terrain. As you can see here, we have a landscape with this. Now you can have a density amount, you can tune this density amount to have less objects in scene if it's coded on the texture itself. So basically what happens here is you have a texture on the landscape, and the texture has auto landscape. You can just like select a texture. You first code this texture, of course, in the material editor, a shader basically, and then you're gonna paint on this scene. And when you paint on the scene, for instance, grass, let's just decrease this brush size a bit, and just paint one there. You can see this grass is also there. It's not just the texture, but it's actual foliage being painted as well. This means that the texture itself gets objects as well, because you're telling it where to paint and where to implement foliage on the texture. It's not just manually painting this texture on, because that's a lot of work. So they're likely doing something like this for all maps as well. So they'll manually need to go through every single map, tune the text, the amount of foliage going onto those textures, and even that will only garner them a little bit more FPS. If they reduce it too much, it's not enough. And next thing they can do is upscaling, like FSR or TSR. However, Unreal Engine already comes with TR enabled these days, TSR. If you go to projects, I think you can just go like this, TSR. As you can see, temporal super resolution is already as an anti-aliasing option. So they can increase, let's just go to settings, scalability, screen percentage, 3D resolution. This is TSR with screen resolution. So 71% is rendering to the full screen resolution. So they're not actually hitting, if they are already using it, they're not actually hitting 4K, but actually hitting 71% of 4K for TSR medium settings. Let's just go to Epic. Epic. As you can see, Epic settings, highest quality settings is 100% resolution. So now you're actually going above 4K resolution if you have a 4K monitor or display or running the game in 4K for PS5. However, high settings 87%, and this can all be manually tuned, so they can really reduce it, but they can't also reduce it too much because then the game is gonna look ugly. So to get multiplayer maps working, all of them on consoles, they'll need to optimize each map, reducing not only the foliage but the amount of random objects in scene. They can manually tune it for some objects to not be shown. However, this also takes a lot of work. As well as lighting, they can reduce the lighting quality and every single quality in the game to get all maps working. The reason they haven't done so already is because they don't have enough time. This idea of local multiplayer only hit them earlier this year. So they're still focusing on other stuff. They can't just go in and do all this stuff as well. Because eventually this is going to be a lot of work to just manually do everything. And they don't want to reduce the quality, but this is what they should do for specifically only local multiplayer. Now, there is gaming rating agencies. They already gone through some rating agencies with the already in-game assets and everything, voice acting, every little thing in the game. So there's ESRB rating, and every country or every region has their own rating system. Now, this is another thing. Every time you implement something in the game that's drastically changes how the game works, it still needs to go through these rating agencies, even if it's not a big change. Sometimes they go through, I'm not sure precisely how this works, but I've heard of it, that small changes might need to be approved through rating agencies as well. So they already did this, and now if they're gonna drastically change it by adding a lot of maps, and then there's a lot of changes and stuff, even though it's not needed, they still need to go through this and make sure. Because if they're not making sure, they can get in trouble. So these rating agencies will need to approve everything else yet again. So that's also a reason why it's not implemented now. It may be later in DLC. Now here's another thing. Sparking Zero might be able to use more maps, but it would be unique maps, not actual maps from the single player game, like the sky map in Xenoverse 2. They could build a similar map which you can play in. I'm not sure. Yeah, I can't find one now, but I'll show you the Xenoverse 2 map. Another one would be Master Roshi's Island. It's basically just an empty ocean with one building and one island, small island, with a little bit of foliage and a palm tree or something. I don't know, but that's also a map they can just add in. So there's a bunch of maps they can also add in. They don't necessarily have to use the already made maps. They can, in DLC, add more maps later on. So that's another option for them. So performance-wise, they can lower resolutions, add different types of maps like I just stated, or they can lower the quality of the game. That's a lot of work. Everything is work they need to do. So what I'm just saying, the reason why we're not getting more maps is they don't have enough time to implement it, and it's going to take them dev time to do that. Well, thank you for watching this. I've been rambling on and on. However, this is the reason. So thank you for watching, and until then, remember to like down below, drop a comment, subscribe if you want to. Until then, goodbye.